There it comes. Tonight's meeting of the City of Sonoma Climate Action Commission is hereby called to order. Our first effort will be the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, which of course has special meaning these days to we Vietnam veterans. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A roll call, please.
Commissioner Heinerman? Here. Commissioner Nickel?
Yes.
Commissioner Ward?
Here.
Youth Member Clemens?
Here.
Vice Chair Conlon?
Present.
And Chair Morrell?
Here.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda calls for us for the approval of the agenda for this evening's meeting. Is the agenda updated on August 9th, 2023 in the afternoon. Are there any discussion or a motion? Let me see first. Any commissioners have any questions or issues with the published agenda?
There's not a reference to the discussion on recommended building, and this is on the agenda. There's a discussion and staff presentation on the next step.
Yes, the buildings, I believe, was added subsequently.
Right, as was solid waste.
As was one other item. What do we need to do to amend the agenda, item 3.1, to add the two elements that were problematic at first and then issued late today?
I have them as listed. Yeah.
I see they are. I'm sorry, I have
That's
an
okay.
older agenda.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, yeah. It doesn't appear on mine either. Here we go. All right, so we're good. Any other issues with tonight's agenda? Looking left, looking right, looking center, hearing none, the agenda is hereby approved.
We can take a
Oh, no, I need a motion to approve.
Motion.
A motion and a second. Oh, my.
And a vote.
Got way ahead of myself.
And this is on the agenda for...
On the agenda, is there, the agenda as published here, is there a motion to approve the agenda this evening?
For May 31st agenda, I make a motion to approve.
Amber, thank you, Amber. Is there a second to said motion?
We're still on the approval of the agenda.
Point of order,
Yeah,
please.
right.
Yes.
Yeah,
The
the
agenda.
agenda.
Let me try that. I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda, Wednesday, August 9, as presented to us by the staff.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Is there a second to said motion?
I second that correct motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any commentary discussion of the motion? Looking left, right, not seeing a lot of hands or noise. Now we'll take a vote. Matthew, you're going to call a roll.
Commissioner Heinerman?
Here.
Is aye? Or nay? Okay. Commissioner Nickel?
Yes.
Commissioner Ward?
Aye.
Vice Chair Conlon?
Yes.
And Chair Morrell?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, team. We got it straight. So now we are on to the initial item. Item 1 in the published agenda is comments from the public. I've been asked to read the statement from the state of California. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on tonight's agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, or the gavel will bang, unless otherwise. Under state law of California, unless otherwise permitted under the Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the Climate Action Commission of Sonoma at this meeting. For items appearing on tonight's agenda, the public is now invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for consideration by the Commission. Upon being acknowledged by the chair, please step to the podium, speak into the microphone, begin by stating and spelling your name, please. Thank you. Are there any comments from the public this evening for the items not appearing on tonight's agenda?
First name Robert, last name Frank. and I hail from 20264 Broadway, which is probably the easiest political target in this town, otherwise known as Train Town. And I must say, when I saw your last meeting, you asked Miss Monique if there was any TV viewers, and she said there was one. I guess that was me. And it made me take stock of, are we good environmental neighbors or not? If we are good environmental neighbors, maybe we're good neighbors in general. So I have a list here of things that perhaps we should be, because if I didn't appreciate it until I took stock of it, how would any of the rest of you appreciate it either? So for example, in our arboretum, we have 2,000 trees. We bellow lots of oxygen. Even our chainsaws are lithium-ion battery powered. In fact, all our tools are electric powered. During the pandemic, we crafted a lithium-ion battery powered locomotive. And with that 30 AC electric horsepower, we can pull up to 200 passengers. And just an amazing piece of efficiency. And I must say, too, that in terms of carpooling, you brought up this point at the last meeting, our average, boy, I'm getting dizzy all of a sudden. Holy mackerel. Boy, that's what happens when you're going on 70 years of age.
Take your time, I know about that.
Anyway, I'll talk with my eyes shut. Our average family unit is 4.2 people, which means that every car is a bona fide carpool. Wow, I'm going to have to sit down. Wow, this is just unbelievable.
I think
Jesus Christ.
I would amend to let you, Mr. Frank, please sit down, and we can deal with public comments and agenda issues later for you, please. Thank you, Travis.
Is there any water? Yeah, your hands are shaking.
This is so strange. Water would be fine, sir.
Drink it slowly.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Cheers.
If you need, I can
Sometimes I sometimes suffer from low blood pressure. So anyway,
well, I'm right behind.
my mother had low blood pressure.
If you need anything, let me know.
No sorries allowed. Catch your breath, sir. Are there any other public comments at this time while Mr. Frank catches his breath? Mr. Frank, take your time.
Maybe I'm okay now. I'm so
All
sorry
right,
about
well, another gentleman was up, so you can get more time if you'd like.
that. Okay.
We're flexible with our
Thank
Brown
you.
Act agenda here.
Very much. Anyway, we don't discourage videotaping at Train Town, which means that when they videotape Train Town, they can take the results back home and show their children, which saves them trips up here. Any other amusement park highly, forbids videotaping. So anyway, what else we have here? I think we mentioned that we are ardent recyclists. Also, we generate millions of dollars of economic multiplier effect, which hopefully will help pay for your environmental goals. I might have mentioned, I can't remember now, that we have gone to nothing but acrylic paints. No longer oil. In fact, they're water soluble. We clean our brushes with water. Anyway, the other thing too is we do not sell, nor do we allow the consumption of alcohol. So we don't pollute our community with inebriated drivers. And I think that's a pretty, significant offering right there. May not be a toxic, oxygen problem, but nonetheless, how do we measure hazards? And in my opinion, you can do a lot more damage with the momentum of a car than you can with the delayed effects of polluted air. But let me just say too that even though east of our parking lot, we don't have a carbon footprint, that's not to say though that, our electricity, where we are in the PG&E grid, our electricity is born 40% from natural gas-fired steam turbines. Believe it or not, 3% of our electricity comes from coal-fired steam turbines. That means 1 in every 33 houses around here, or 1 in 33 lights, or whatever unit of measurement you want to call, is powered by coal. So at any rate, but it's trending better. 10% is nuclear, 10% is hydro, about 9 or 10% is wind, 15% is solar, the 5% is thermal, 7% is miscellaneous, including methane mounds. And anyway, that's, and I just wanted to share these points about Town, because even I didn't appreciate it until your organization made me sit down and take stock. So anyway, another thing I wanted to mention too, because this always comes up at virtually every meeting, and that is the homeless. One thing that is never talked about in that equation is economic activity for the homeless. What if there are wine bottles, and up and down my street, the average consumption per capita is about a bottle, every other day, I would guess. What if wine bottles internationally were made to a Sonoma standard? And I'm talking about our city name here. Our city is respected enough in name so that what if bottles were made perhaps of Pyrex, so they couldn't be used as Molotov cocktails, so they'd be lighter, so the homeless could carry more? What if the homeless were given a special redemption rate, like China has a special tariff rate? The point being is that if they could harvest bottles and give them an economic activity, perhaps we could conflate the homeless problem with the environmental problem. Anyway, that's about it.
Thank you very much, Mr.
I feel
Frank.
so much better. Thank you for the water.
Thank you, and we hope you're feeling better soon. There are other public comments at this time on the agenda item. Thank you, sir. Please come forward and state your name in the usual situation.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Armando Zimmerman. I live on West Spain Street. I'm going to begin with saying that I've been studying, and it's late, the city's general plan, which I understand is going under revision, and that'll be soon. And so I was looking through the general plan, and unfortunately, unless I'm just missing aspects of it, I can't find much in there at all about greenhouse gases, other pollution that comes from motor vehicles, tailpipe emissions, et cetera, et cetera. And I've spent 7 years or so on the Traffic Safety Committee, so I should know something about this, but I don't know it scientifically. It's not there. And so I guess one of my questions is, how does this commission dovetail with the planned revision, and what elements will be added that will sort of start to connect the dots? I see so much in the current general plan that talks about fixing things in the future, but there are things that we could be working on, and some we do work on already, but there are things that we could be working on concurrently that would take in current housing, current traffic patterns, not necessarily things in the future. It would help for these dots to be connected. So I don't expect that you would give me an answer regarding, did I miss this commission in the current general plan, or could you answer that anyway?
I will answer some of that.
Okay.
Would you introduce
Thank you.
yourself, please?
Thank you.
Jennifer Gates, Community Development Director, but I will answer that during the next steps.
Oh.
We'll talk about that.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing is, I think from the Traffic Safety Committee trying to look at the nexus between all of so many dots. One thing, I think the city of Sonoma has given up the opportunity. For instance, a few years ago, a conceptual plan for a traffic, if you want to call it circle, or traffic, what was it, circle or roundabout at Broadway and Napa Street. turned down. I couldn't understand it. I thought, boy, this town's so progressive, it'll go for it. No, it wouldn't. And the current existing city plan talks about how this city was planned by Vallejo, basically for horses and carts. And so I don't think we've moved too far from that standard of linear streets, very little enforcement and so forth. When I moved here, my wife and I moved here in 1973, there was one traffic signal, maybe those of you that know that, at 5th and Napa Street. That was it. So we haven't made a lot of progress, and I think it's ironic that the state and the county are moving toward a roundabout south of here. They pioneered one out on Arnold Drive, and it works great, even though it was not received very, enthusiastically and so forth. I've traveled in Europe and so forth, and they've been around for a long time. There's cities in the United States now that basically, there's one particular city in the Midwest, I can't think of the name of it, that has basically done away with stop signs, always stop signs, traffic signal, and gone to roundabouts and traffic circles. So at any rate, that's my comment for now, and I'm hoping that the revised plan will somehow start to connect. What I see are dots that are not connected, and there's even some dots that aren't even there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very insightful and well-intentioned comments. As chair, I'm not allowed to comment, but I would be pleased to call on our community development director, if it's appropriate under the agenda, to address the issue of the general plan.
I'll talk about it during next steps under the next item on the agenda, or rather the regular calendar agenda.
I see it. Let us move on now to the consent calendar. These are the minutes. Dr. Wagner?
We have to check online to see if there's any.
Are there any public comments online? Thank you for the reminder, sir.
There are currently no hands raised on Zoom.
Then I will close public comment for this evening on the item 1 of the agenda and move to item 2 on the agenda, the consent calendar, the minutes from the May 31st meeting.
I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes from May 31st.
Thank you, Commissioner Ward.
And I would be pleased to second that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Conlon. With a motion and a second, we have an open for commission member discussion. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes of the end of May meeting?
I will make a brief comment. These minutes are very concise and are very action-oriented. It's a good practice, I think, to keep staff from having to reiterate everything that was captured in the video of our meetings. One practice I've seen practice at the county level, at the transportation agency, is embedding the timestamp of the video in the minutes at just maybe at the highest level, so that it's easy for the public to quickly figure out which portion of the minutes they might be interested in reviewing. It's something for staff to consider. I just recommend it. Just take a look at it. If it's extra effort, probably not much extra effort if you're actually reviewing the video to generate the minutes. So something Drew Nichols is doing at SCTA without, and it makes the process go really smoothly for everybody. So just a suggestion. No other comments from me on the minutes.
Thank you, Tom. Any other commissioner comments on this motion? Hearing none, I believe it's time we can ask Matthew to do a roll call vote on the motion as seconded.
Commissioner Heinerman?
Aye.
Commissioner Nickel?
I'll say that again. Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Ward?
Aye.
Vice Chair Conlon?
Aye.
And Chair Morrell?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. We'll now move to item 3 on tonight's agenda, the regular calendar of the Commission. 3.1 involves the Climate Action Plan. This is a significant document that's been available in draft for some time, and tonight we have an agenda item, presentation, discussion, and recommendations by a number of groups: transportation, buildings and solid waste, water and carbon sequestration, government operations, and community engagement ad hoc subcommittees. And I believe we'll start with a staff presentation unless the Community Development Director has comments on the general plan linkage. We could go to next steps on the presentation, starting with the water recommendations. Jennifer.
I recommend that you go ahead and start with your discussions on your individual recommendations from your ad hoc committees, and then staff will follow up with the next steps and some recommendations in regards to moving forward with the reaching out to the different agencies and working with you all through that. And I would like to do that after we have the community engagement discussion.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer. So the first staff presentation, as I understand it from the agenda, is water recommendations. Do we have the full item to be put up on the screen, or are we simply going to be talking it through and it's available to the public on the website in its full flavor? And are you looking to a staff presentation or to a commissioner presentation from the ad hoc committee?
We're asking for the ad hoc committees to present their ideas. Everything was attached to the agenda. So in the interest of time, I would just say if there's certain ones that the ad hoc committee themselves want to make sure that you have discussion around and bring to the attention of the commission as a group and make sure there is discussion to do so. And then during discussion of that item, that the individual commissioners can then ask further clarification questions or other discussions that maybe the ad hoc committee didn't actually touch on at the beginning.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Community Development Director Gates. So I believe that Amber Ward is going to be doing the initial presentation on the ad hoc water recommendations. The ad hoc committee was composed of Commissioner Ward and myself. Amber.
Thank you, David. Okay, so this is pretty similar to what David and I presented a while back, and so just to quickly run through what we want to prioritize and have as our action items. We want to install rainwater capture systems at the city courtyard and the police station and council chambers. And then we also want to encourage to piggyback off rainwater capture for private citizens as well. We also want to reinvigorate an already going system, the Cash for Turf system for private citizens. And a fun one that we added in was to encourage water conservation for highest water users. Again, this is all stuff we have talked about. I think one of the biggest things is that we have great resources here in the city from the Sonoma Ecology Center and from Public Works to be able to assist us with all of these programs. I think one of the ones, like simple one of encouraging private citizens to use rainwater capture systems. This was something we did research. We found that we could purchase these in bulk and be able to sell them and offer a rebate system to really encourage folks to do this. As for the rainwater capture system here and at the corporation yards, we already have seen this in practice at Flowery School. We know that it works, so we have a good working example to be able to work from. So I think that one's a huge one to know how it already works. It's not something that's really that out of the blue for us. As far as time frame, the public rainwater capture systems, we're trying to start seeking funding for this as soon as possible by Q4 of this year, September timeframe. The rest of these, the Cash for Turf, that's another one that, since it is a system that's already in place, it's just us trying to do a little bit more work and love into it. That's something that can also begin now. For private rainwater capture, that's something that's, I think, would get a bit more love and support as we start to do our work for public systems. So that's something that we can start to talk about next year. And for the starting to identify high water users in the community with the help of Public Works and everything, that's something that maybe we can talk about next year, because we know that that's going to be a really new sort of idea, even though it will be really huge. As we had in public comment, you know, this is the sort of commission where it has people taking stock of what they're doing. So we just want to help encourage that a little bit without it feeling punitive. There is quite a bit of funding available through this, both from private folks that are interested and from grants, state, federal, etc. The rainwater capture systems, that could be CAL FIRE would be a great resource for that as well. I don't know if there's anything that wasn't already talked about that I need to really highlight on. I don't know if we want to at this point, if anybody had any additional questions, if we want to do it that way.
Thank you, Amber. Excellent presentation. I think now at this point, are there other questions from commissioners that are of a technical nature as the first order of business on the water recommendations as written?
Just
Philip?
one point of order is for the staffer, for the chair, do we want to do public comments on each individual piece and then have commission comments, or is there a process that we need to follow?
Since this one is actually not going to be a vote, you can keep it open if you would like. We can have public comment open throughout, and you can go through each one, or you guys can have your presentations of each and have a discussion, initial questions, right? And then you can open for public comment, and then you can continue your discussion after public comment. So we can keep it a little bit more flexible since there is no vote.
With a small number of at least in person, Matthew, or is there a large number? Can you tell the number of participants online who might be sending in comments and questions?
So I have 3 people viewing it on TV,
Mm-hmm.
and then I have 1 person on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. So that about equals our audience participation. So my take would be to go ahead and open each one to some public comments, then have commissioner comments, and then sort of close that item and move to the next one as we move forward. Without objection, I would so rule. So let's go to public comment on the presentation of the water recommendations, both from Commissioner Ward and from the written material that's on the website. Is there any public comment either from the external system or from the audience this evening?
I do have 1 hand raised on Zoom.
Let's go ahead with the Zoom, and then we'll take the one audience member who's been on his feet. Perfect.
All right, go ahead, Joel. Looks like you're muted.
How's that?
There you go.
Okay. Thanks for being there tonight, you guys. Rainwater catchment is it's a high quality water, you know, but I am a little discouraged to not see anything about gray water at this point, or expanding the network of water coming from the sewage treatment plant on 8th Street East. I mean, I know, I think it's smart that we're going ahead with emphasizing the rainwater catchment, but please don't forget about the gray water.
Thank you, Joel. Excellent comment. Appreciate it. Now let's take the comment from the gentleman here in the audience. Please step to the microphone. Thank you. No, don't trip yourself. Please not.
There's nobody here. Armando Zimmerman again. I would like to give a thumbs up to the comment on gray water and reclamation, because one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that the city of Santa Rosa is, and don't quote me on all the facts, but it sounds like they're taking a pretty unique approach to addressing these sideshows that you might have read about, where, you know, basically drivers of cars do stunts, this and that and whatever, and they're very difficult to track. They're very difficult to, even in Santa Rosa, they're having a lot of trouble. But the city of Santa Rosa has decided to maybe approach this from the standpoint of where they have quite a few named participants, drivers, and it looks like they're going to they either have or they're going to try to take legal action under pollution standards, in that they found that these sideshows tear up the street, they leave debris, they leave tire debris, they leave a tremendous amount of tailpipe gunk all over the place. And what Santa Rosa has determined is that a lot of this debris finds its way into storm drains. And so the connection that I see is that our own whatever water treatment plant has a problem with too much junk going down there that makes it more difficult to turn what they can into water, gray water, including cigarette butts, etc. But we have our own tire skid marks, everything else. In front of my house, the road is so deteriorated, it doesn't take much to grind it all up, and then when it rains, it goes down into the thing. So I just wanted to mention that what Santa Rosa is trying to do. Now, I'm not saying it's factual from my standpoint. You might, if you're interested, you might look that up as a possible recourse against drivers that choose to ruin the street and damage the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other public comments, either from the online team or in the audience? Going once, twice? Yes, sir. Step to the microphone, please.
This is on the water, right?
Correct. We're on the water recommendations of the Water and Carbon Ad Hoc
Okay.
Commission team.
The thing I want to talk about are the economics.
Your introduction, please.
Leo McCloskey, and alternate climate commissioner. The first thing I'm looking at is when you're budgeting something and you're asking for a budget, so here for the city, and we're looking in here, we have a vendor, you're a vendor, and you're selling something to the city. It could be, an accountant would see it that way. So it says Public Rainwater Capture System, Sonoma Ecology Center's research department will design. There are costs in here, and it seems that this document is approving expenditures, line item expenditures that would show up in a profit and loss statement. I wonder if those types of things should be omitted from this, so that it's not an approval here at this meeting to fund a vendor who's on the board and directing it, but it could be passed through one layer, some layer of the accounting department to look at the fiduciary angle. Otherwise, there's no fiduciary responsibility. It's going to this committee and being transferred from the city, the expenditure, to us in this meeting. And we would be approving that. I would hate to see those kinds of policies run. I mean, I would never run a company that way, a winery or something. You would never have the vendor decide the cost center and approve of it while we're at it. You know, it would go back to somebody inside the regulatory body, the city of Sonoma, for another level of approval, or somebody would pass off on this. So that's the only point I would make. It's a fiduciary point. It's not personal, but it's a point of good management. Thanks.
Thank you for your public comments this evening. Are there any other comments on the Water Ad Hoc recommendations? Hearing none from the public, we're going to turn next
And
to
through the chair, I just wanted to note
Yes,
as well, there are
Matthew.
there are no hands raised on Zoom currently.
Thank you. I assumed that from your not, but yes. Now we'll turn to a commissioner discussion of the water recommendations as presented by the Ad hoc Water and Carbon Committee.
I think.
Sir, please.
Just a general comment, though it's well written, well thought out, some good ideas. So it's just, thank you for doing the work. It looks real good.
Thank you, Philip. Tom?
Thank you. Well, I wanted to start by just saying I'm pleased with the public comments tonight. There's a diversity of perspectives on some of these things, and glad to see a representative from the tourism community be here. We've been asking for that, and it's encouraging to see someone show up, as well as from the Traffic Safety Committee. That's it, and especially emphasizing coordination between our various city government bodies. I'm encouraged, I'm enthused by those responses, those comments from the public, I should say. With respect to the water recommendations, I was a little bit confused because we had discussed a very similar set of these back in April and had made a recommendation of only $15,000 for rainwater capture, as we, David, you and I recommended to the city council during the budget consideration. And so I was hoping you could express, or you could describe whether that had any influence, our vote here had any influence on the new recommendations you're making here tonight.
Amber, would you like to respond initially before the other member of the ad hoc might respond?
I feel like the other member might have some input.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tom. Time moves on. We were under a very tight time squeeze, even before we learned about $1 million deficit and a lot of excitement on the budget process. So we assume that at this point, more realism in the budgetary process is most recommended, and we came up with the best numbers we can. I would think this ad hoc and probably the other ad hocs are all guessing at numbers pretty diligently, but guesstimating. And as a result, this still needs to go through a great deal more fiduciary analytics of all kinds before we would ever get into a true budget prospect. And I'm sure staff, Dr. Wagner and his review, Travis, will be looking heavily at this along with the new city manager and indeed our new community development director, who all have budget requests that will exceed budget availability, so squeeze will occur, and that's at least my sense of trying to put forth at this point the better numbers from the ad hoc as best we could.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I'm wondering if there's any prioritization, because we do know funds are limited, and I was drawn to the highest water users. I think you had a $2,500 number attached to that measure. Can you elaborate a little?
Amber, you got any memory of this? I mean, I think it's really staff time. We were looking at some I would share with the group a comment that I have made over the years about budgetary numbers. I call them ceiling numbers. And the normal observer thinks what I mean is that that's a maximum, and in fact, no, it's a look up at the ceiling and pull down a number. It's tongue-in-cheek. That's just an estimate. Probably I'm not looking at all these documents while trying to run a meeting, but my sense is that these are just estimates to get us moving, and that's probably staff time numbers.
It was mainly staff time, and it was possible inserts in bills and online, that sort of outreach. And then as far as prioritization, I feel like our timeline is probably our best prioritization. So even though maybe the highest water users is a small chunk of what we're in the grand scheme of our budget, because it's a newer sort of idea compared to the others, we wanted to push that out. So I think we kind of prioritized it in order on this document at least, so from the rainwater capture systems down to the highest water users.
Yeah, this sequence was on purpose. The budget estimates are ceiling numbers to be moved forward as best we can in all of this. Things like highest water users are a target because it sends a message. And it sends a message about climate, about economics, and about being a player in a community system. People have the right to use water, but maybe if the big water users in an arena of water conservation need a little more attention, and sometimes dollars can provide some attention. Other commissioner comments on the water conservation objectives, statements, and recommendations? Seeing none, Tom.
I might just add one more comment on the highest water users idea, that there are, I don't know if the city is doing this presently, but I know that there are best practices in water utility operations, demand side management, that systems that are set up to do this, and at least just give people the feedback on what their water consumption is. So that might be, in fact, welcome to some users. I know the city does have a process for when a customer gets a very high bill, there's a process for helping that customer identify if they have a leak or whatnot, and that can be very supportive to customers as well.
Indeed, there is a leak, fixing of leak cost reimbursement program that exists. I happen to know because I recently had a leak and went through an expensive plumbing, and we applied for reimbursement. Didn't get any, but we applied. Alan?
We're blessed by not having many mosquitoes, but if we start getting a lot of standing water around, so there's some very unfortunate actors out there, and there's something that we should just be aware of.
Thank you. Good point indeed. Other comments on the water from commissioners? Are we looking for some sort of recommendation at this point, staff, on the ad hoc recommendations coming forward before we move to the next item? Is there a vote needed, or are we just presenting as commentary
You're just
for staff to
presenting.
digest?
Yep,
That's what I
presenting,
thought.
and if there's anything that as a group we're hearing is not of interest, then that would be different. But I think for the most part so far, in water, everything's a go. So we're just gonna take what you guys are talking about and utilize that, and we'll discuss that here in a minute.
Thank you. And having been wearing the hat of running the meeting, I forgot in my own comments, I wanted to react to the gray water recommendations that we heard in public comment. I think that's very powerful. And I think our ad hoc committee, as busy as we were, could have well added something on gray water as well, and I appreciate the public's addition to that.
And you're reminding me that I too had a follow-up on public comment, and that was, I too am was a little surprised to see the direct recommendation of what was termed a potential vendor. I don't think that was intentional. I think it was more illustrative of what could happen, but I'm sure the city would be careful about that, so I'm not worried about it.
I'm sure the city has many vendors to consider, including those who have already designed systems that work locally, but I'm sure there are external vendors of various kinds who would be pleased to respond to appropriate RFPs. And I would also note that on this item and many others this evening, there's a great deal now of early EPA funding. There have been a series of daily webinars. I've been in touch with Region 9. There's a lot of EPA funding beginning to be available, interestingly, in areas, and certainly in the area of water and water conservation. That is one, as we'll get to in the next item as well.
And that would just be, I'm sorry,
Tom,
just be an
and then
encouragement
Philip.
for all members of the commission and members of the public who might be paying attention tonight, if there are good grant opportunities that match up with some of these things, we should bring those to staff's attention. So.
I just made a note on the gray water. There is a lot of technology in building construction to segregate gray water and treat it there on the premises. And one of the things that we may want to consider in the long run is whether we want to talk about how larger buildings or buildings with multi-residences might want to use new construction to handle gray waters. That's something that's worth considering.
Thank you. All in all, my assessment is a very useful conversation. Any other comments before we close this item and move to the next one? Going once, twice, Matthew, anything crazy going on? And you'd let me know, raise your hand if there's stuff you want to add from our colleagues out in the ether. Thank you. Then I'll close the item on water and turn next to carbon sequestration. Again, Commissioner Ward is going to be starting our conversation of the ad hoc, which was a water and carbon combined team of 2 commissioners under the Brown Act.
Okay, so moving on to carbon sequestration. We had a lot of lively discussions on this one, so I anticipate it might be the same this time around. We do have biochar in there, and we recognize that the discussion before was that we were a bit hesitant to move forward at the grand scale that we dreamed of initially, but we still think it is an important thing, even if it is presentation lots as a start off, because I know that's something we thought of as a compromise, having smaller lots to be able to show people what's going on, what this is all about. And then this is something that can tie into other projects as well, just as options for what we could do going forward. We can get into that a bit more later. I'm just going to keep going down our other things. We wanted to do a new tree inventory because we may have one, it's just pretty outdated. So we think that would be very beneficial. In addition to the Miyawaki Forest, which we had discussed before, there's been talk of different locations that would really be beneficial to the community and have a lot of co-benefits to have forest growth that would cool down areas and provide shelter and space for people to be able to enjoy it, and again, just be an educational moment for people to recognize how helpful it is to have trees. As we discussed earlier, I mean, at Traintown there's an arboretum with what I have it written down actually. The arboretum has 2,000 trees at Traintown. That's huge. So it will be nice to have more of that conversation. We also heard the discussion about carbon credits and getting into that game of that being a way to offset our carbon. So we wanted to add that in there as a source of carbon sequestration. In addition to, in the future, sequestering carbon on Sonoma City limits owned by lands owned by the state of California, Sonoma County, the Valley School Districts, and then also getting into burying biochar on private properties. These are things that we recognize are going to be further out as we develop more favor and can measure and see the results of biochar in our smaller spots that we're doing. So those are all of the ideas that we have towards carbon sequestration. So I figure I'll leave it there. All the notes are in there. So if we want to discuss further, I think it would be better to just go that way for it.
Thank you, Amber. An excellent start. I would simply add the preamble to the several pages that the ad hoc presents on carbon sequestration highlights the fact that our goal in the city of Sonoma is net zero, N-E-T, net zero, 2030, 6 years and a half now or so, a little less than a half. And net zero is going to require some levels of carbon sequestration. It can't be accomplished only by the critical role of emissions reduction, but has to be, those will need to be supplemented by some level of carbon sequestration in order to get to net zero. So now we're turning to public comments on this piece of an ad hoc, as I recall our sequence, before Commissioner. So I would turn to public comments, Matthew, either online or individuals here in tonight's audience.
Just one question. Biochar, what's that?
Come on forward. Please, as public comment should be. And that way folks in the ether can hear you as well, sir.
A show of ignorance. What's biochar?
I can respond. I'm trying to get it. The basic role of public comments is that they, I want to show I've learned the rule, Jennifer. If I stray, my hand has been slapped before. It's right. This is a technical question. I'll give you a technical answer, sir, unless someone else wants to. It's basically elemental carbon made from waste wood in the absence of, with heat in the absence of oxygen. You take waste wood, for example, forest trimmings to reduce forest fire risk. You put it in a stainless steel container. You add heat, probably 500 C, something in that range. We're talking about a lot of heat. You drive off all the impurities that nature put in the wood, and you have elemental carbon, which science shows remains in the soil in a helpful manner for decades, centuries, and perhaps millennia. Anyone else want to further comment about biochar in the public comment period?
I can comment just a little bit more on
Thank
that.
you, Philip.
I first became aware of biochar as a use for remediation of cleanup sites because it's carbon and it adheres to heavy metals. So you're going to keep the heavy metals out of the environment by keeping them in the carbon. So there are a number of potential uses for biochar that are being researched now. I think it originally started out of the idea of we can bind some of the more dangerous toxic elements into this material.
How,
You mentioned high heat is required, so where does that come from and what kind of footprint does that leave us with?
Excellent questions. The heat often comes from an associated facility like a cogeneration plant. It can also come from the simply burning of a fossil fuel in order to add that heat and then capture the heat that remains for other purposes. It also produces a great deal of self-heat in the pyrolysis process. Once you've started with a propane tank in typical systems, a tank no larger than the size of your barbecue, then the system becomes self-sustaining from the heat being given off from the pyrolyzed wood. Next, Leo, if you'd introduce yourself to the audience. That's
Leo
in the ether.
Bukowski, Climate Action Commissioner, PhD in chemical ecology. The carbon, if it's done right, the good thing is you get carbon and you get some coating of organics. Some residual organic could be left. That could be the primary useful thing. Otherwise, you could see it as a soil amendment. I'll throw this out. The only place in the continental U.S. where it has been used in soils is not in California soils. It's in a soil, I'm not going to inform this, but it's used in a particular area of the United States, and it hasn't proved useful with the USDA yet. They've ground it up and tried to amend soils. It can remove nutrients. It can remove nutrients the way you mentioned it, that you could have metals in the soil that you need, but when you throw in the biochar, they're sequestered into this carbon, and then they stay there and they're removed. So if you had micronutrients, boron, or some kind of chemicals, So it's really complicated. The cycles are more, you can't just toss it around. It's kind of a marketing term for charcoal, just to throw that out too. More later.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
there are a number of property owners that have biochar as a ground cover. And does the city have any methodology to deal with this, or is that everything on the property owner?
As I understand the question for the ad hoc water and carbon team, Alan, the proposed idea is for the city to seek funding, probably from a mass availability of grants in this field, in order to assist various property owners, having first, as we've recommended in the ad hoc, testing it and demonstrating it in public-owned facilities, like the Montini and the Sonoma Garden Park and so on. But yes, if we begin to move into the private sector, there could be mixed funding. There's a great deal of federal and state funding available for this as a possibility as we move forward. Other comments on the carbon sequestration ad hoc recommendations? We've had public comments. We've had some commissioner discussion. Philip's in for more.
You want, Mr. McCloskey?
Yeah, Leo McCloskey. So, yeah, I would like to comment just on the carbon sequestration. You know, as a person who knows the biotic and abiotic better than anybody in the room, not that that's everything, but the top items here for carbon sequestration would be the organic materials, the plants. So the Sonoma tree canopy, that's a huge thing. Our tree canopies here are tiny compared to the tropics, where we get a huge boost of oxygen. The Milwaukee forest sounds good because that's very appealing to the public. That sounds fantastic. It's a tree, it's the carbon. And it lowers the temperature, it makes oxygen, it's part of the oxygen cycle, it's part of the carbon cycle. So, but what I would have to say again, and I mentioned it last time, I can see that the carbon sequestration, that is in a mathematical formula, y equals mx plus b dot dot dot, some other values. If you have this formula, you're saying you're going to put something, let's call it y as carbon, into something, you're sequestering it, and the math is not going to work out for that. If you look at biochar the way the AAAS has looked at it, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the University of Bordeaux, the entire French wine industry, you can't find widespread use because it doesn't work yet. It doesn't work to move to biochar. I think the calculations by the AAAS are a 2% gain net if there was worldwide recommendations and regulatory agencies demanding the use of this technique. So it's very inefficient in an equation. The net over time, over the millennia, you said decades, centuries, millennia, and over this period of time when this biochar, this charcoal's in the ground, it still uses oxygen, and it causes that if you went into a biochar cycle worldwide, there would be a 10% estimated reduction in the oxygen because you would be burning down all the trees. I met with another ecologist here, tropical ecologist, before I came over, and it's just the idea of sequestration doesn't equal any ecological efficiencies or use or any possible reason to do this. And I think we would be stepping out as the second most important city of the California wine industry. We could stand up an article, I could imagine this, an article stands up, Napa Valley, New York Times, and if they were biocharing that valley, somebody is going to do an expose, a Michael Lewis on this. It's just a crazy idea, and I don't think we should jump into it.
You've reached your 3-minute limit. Thank you, Mr.
And I don't
Petrosky.
think we should have a vendor involved.
Let us conclude at 3 minutes, please.
Yeah, I know, I heard you. I heard you.
I heard you too.
Yeah, but I'm still going over, just ask your permission, and I'll step off, but I think you have a conflict of interest, you're kicking me off the stage. So I think you should think about that too.
The rules are the rules for anybody, including yourself. There's much to say, and in the future it'll be said. We're not going to get into a deep discussion here. Philip.
I do think it's important for you to disclose your conflict of interest because that is part of the law. That if you have a conflict of interest, you should disclose it.
Of course. Whenever there is a conflict of interest, which there is not at the moment, There's no money on the table, there's no contract being negotiated.
Okay.
When that happens before this commission, you will immediately see my reaction there too.
Awesome.
As would be yours if it came up in your arena or any
Absolutely.
other commissioners.
I'd be
No different.
I'd be a little more liberal in my construction. I would say, look, I just want you to know. But yes, if I had a conflict of interest that was a direct one, even an indirect one, I would let people know. Well, I was kind of surprised to see all the references to biochar because we voted no the last time. And so, but I want to thank you for helping me get a better understanding of biochar because I was limited before and I had done some research. I'd done a whole lot of research since I saw the recommendation. There's a lot of research going on right now, and unfortunately, Mr. McCluskey's slightly wrong on the Forest Service has done and actually approves of use of biochar for water retention in national forests. It's very good at water retention, but it's also very good in forests. So I thought, well, let's see why this is reintroduced and why we're going to look at this. And I have no interest in the biochar industry whatsoever. I have a fascination with science, though, and so I like to read what the science says. So I looked for some guidelines on how do you apply biochar, and I couldn't find any. I looked for some guidelines on what soils benefit from biochar or what soils don't, and I didn't find any. What I did find, which I thought was most interesting, was a paper that was published by Cal Poly last month saying that there was a promise in biochar, and I will read verbatim the conclusion at the end of the report by Drs. Lee and Drs. Tasnani, and I have a copy on my computer if you want to see it. They talk about how there are currently field studies being done, there are attempts to standardize protocols, and there are economic assessments of whether or not it's worth the money being done now. They found that biochar is very sensitive to temperature fluctuations. And I'm not quoting verbatim now, but telling you in general that there must be regional specific guidelines on the use of biochar because certain areas it works better than others, which is also something the USGS found. There's an extensive study the USGS did on carbon sequestration, which analyzes regions of the country and what appropriate areas there are for carbon sequestration, pointing up, like you said, Mr. McCluskey, that forests are very good. But I did want to get to the findings because I don't want to take too much time. And the conclusions say that there is promise that biochar could be a valuable tool for sequestration, and this is the quote. However, to fully realize this potential, further research is needed to better understand the complex interactions between biochar and soil processes and to develop sustainable practices for its production and application. I don't have a problem with biochar. I have a problem with applying it when we don't know how to do it, where to do it, and what it does. And I have a problem paying taxpayers' money to do that. I want to see an analysis of why this is a better alternative than geological sequestration or mechanical sequestration, which mechanical sequestration, there's been a number of developments in that area in the last few years that show great promise in being able to sequester carbon mechanically. We voted no before. If we vote to change our vote, I'm still voting no right now, but I'm saying I'm going to watch this area. I think there's a lot of promise there, as the doctors from Cal Poly said, but we're just not ready. And this, if you read the recommendations, we jump right in feet first. We're going to start it in September. So it's just jumping in deep water without knowing what you're going to do. Now, I know you have some analysis or some familiarity with the industry, and you can probably tell me some things I don't know, but I'm only looking at government studies, scientific studies that I've reviewed, not literature from people who sell the product, and that may be helpful to do. The other thing I don't recall discussing before in the reports was the rationale for purchasing carbon offset credits. And I'm not sure how the city's going to calculate what it is we need to offset, what markets we're going to donate to, and why we're going to use taxpayer money to purchase carbon offsets. I don't remember having that discussion before, and if that's my fault that we didn't, I just apologize for not knowing we authorized this before, but it seems to me like we need to think long and hard about how we use taxpayer money and whether it's appropriate and how to do it. So on the biochar, we said no before. I think we stay there. On the offset credits, please help me understand what your recommendation is and how it applies here.
Thank you for your excellent comments. Are there other commissioner comments? Alan.
In Switzerland, they are doing a massive carbon sequestration, taking carbon out of the air in a chemical reaction and then making it into a solid and burying it. So, you know, that is, it requires just a vast array of solar collectors to do this because it's very energy intensive. But it would be nice to restore our atmosphere if it would be possible.
Thank you, Alan. Other comments, Commissioner comments at this point on this topic? Kendall, come on in.
I don't have much to say on the biochar component, but I just wanted to say that I still really like the idea of the Miyawaki forest. Like other people said, I think it's a great idea to benefit the public and also our environment, of course.
Thank you, Commissioner Clemens. Tom.
Appreciate the discussion so far. I'll just stay positive and say I too like the trees as we agreed to last time. I also know the city is contemplating upgrades to Olson Park, I believe. Olson Park is a park desperately in need of shade. I was there with my granddaughter recently, and we both came to that conclusion. Trees.
Other commissioner comments on the carbon sequestration?
Just for the record, if I could.
For the record, indeed.
The article I'm talking about was published in the Journal of Carbon Research. It was published July 7th last month. It's pretty up to date. I think we all, if we're going to go down a route where we spend a lot of money on this, we all should read it. It's got a lot of information that's highly technical, but it also is pretty clear in its conclusions.
Thank you. Tom.
I'm sorry, and one more comment. We should understand that the county is engaged right now in a county-wide carbon stock assessment study where we're having a professional consultant come in and tell us what our carbon stocks are to date and what they have been historically and what the potential for tree-based, natural-based sequestration might be. When we talk about encouraging planting of trees in the city of Sonoma, that conversation should probably be in context with how many trees have we cut down over time in the city of Sonoma, etc. So that's what that study is supposed to help with, and we shouldn't think we're doing this on our own. There's a lot of work going on in this area.
On the trees, there's a great deal of interest within the tree committee of the so-called PROS Commission. We've been in touch with the chair of the PROS Commission, and there's a great deal of interest in the tree committee in a variety of issues, from a Miyawaki forest to the tree inventory to being careful about cutting down trees and so on, and looking at net as well as gross. With respect to the questions raised by one of the commissioners concerning carbon offset credits, absolutely correct. It did not come up before. The words net by 2030 suggest it becomes imperative, and the idea of the ad hoc commission was to simply get us started to start getting our feet wet into the whole CDR game. It's a vast game with a great deal going on, and I would certainly endorse the prior commission comments about not wasting taxpayer money. There is no waste of taxpayer money. With respect to wineries and Sonoma's role in the wine industry, I would note massive improvements in a large winery in Monterey County, which has been documented in a series of studies by Dr. Doug Beck. They've taken from the original studies in one 400-acre replicated study done with UC Davis, and they're now using biochar in all 17,000 acres in the Monterey Pacific Vineyard because of its proven advantages, not only on water conservation and yield, but on economic performance. But there's a great deal to say that needs to be looked at scientifically and not ad hoc. Other comments before we move to further discussion, if there is any? If not, I believe there is a vote needed with respect to the carbon sequestration recommendations going forward. Is that correct, Travis?
There's no vote. Yeah.
No vote. Okay.
So just again, a point of order, when we have two new items that we did vote previously on and were not included in the previous reports, and we have a report now that comes out with these two items, how do we handle that?
So as part of the next steps, we can just go ahead and talk about it now. So the next steps is we are going to take the climate action plan that Travis has prepared and these comments and your recommendations, and then staff's going to take that information and we're going to draft a new revised climate action plan for review with the public and with this commission and other commissions. Your commission will vote at that time on that, provide comments, may vote at that hearing. There may be modifications that will be voted on at that time, but as we've all stated here and people have commented on, there may be things in here that staff it's just not going to be feasible. So we need to take a closer look at what is being recommended and what we're thinking, what the county has going. So this is, I would say, step one, because we do have a general plan, as was noted, that's coming down the pipeline. So we will be touching this again very soon. So this is just, I would call step one in getting something before council so that we can start moving forward on some of these implementation things. And then once we have our general plan, we'll come back, we'll have more information. There'll be changes that are going to need to be had based on maybe if the land uses have changed slightly or things like that. So more to come, and I'll talk a little bit more about the details of that shortly after we're done with this discussion.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I believe, unless I hear to the contrary, we're closing the discussion of water and carbon and moving to the transportation recommendations. Is that correct? And who will be doing the presentation from the ad hoc? Does that be the Vice Chair Conlon? It will.
Yes, thank you, I will. So we stuck pretty closely to the document that we submitted and discussed last April. We did get a little more specific in terms of who would do what, when, and how many hours we thought it might take. So just to refresh my own first recollection of that, we had agreed that transportation was our highest priority. I believe we took a vote to that finding. And while we had originally, our ad hoc had recommended, I think, a significantly larger sum, we ended up with a reduced request because we discovered just prior to the meeting last April that much of what we thought we were going to be needing to get funding for was already being prepared by the county. That is a county-wide bicycle and pedestrian plan update that would encourage active transportation in all the jurisdictions of the county, and that Sonoma has the opportunity to participate in that, and that the only element that was missing from being funded was approximately an $8,000 item to study in detail the sidewalks of Sonoma and identify any gaps in the sidewalks that would be beneficial to close. So our top recommendation was to, so that was our budgetary recommendation, was for the city to find $8,000 to do that. And we had initially been told prior to Jennifer's coming on board that it was probably possible that we'll be able to find that $8,000 in existing staff budget requests. And that was documented in David and my comments as representatives of this commission to the budget hearing process back in probably late May and into June. So that's why that was the only monetary thing we thought was really necessary from the city at the time. This commission though did make a recommendation for the city to spend about $30,000 to be sure that we kept transportation as our top priority. And I'll be looking for commissioners' support of that again tonight. If that's changed, we should talk about that. But I still think transportation, considering it's the biggest piece of our carbon footprint, is really where we need to focus. In terms of our actual bullet by bullet recommendations, our top policy change was to, as quoted in the staff's draft report, to ban the construction of new fossil fuel stations and to ban new drive-through windows. As you recall, both of those things require only city ordinance, just a vote of the city council to implement, and the templates for those ordinances are readily available from the transportation agency and other sources. So it should not take a tremendous amount of staff work. We estimated about 8 hours to customize those templates for the city council to consider. Obviously, legal counsel would need some time to review that, and the council itself would need to do so. Our second stack of recommendations is to, as I mentioned before, to leverage the $2 million in existing bike ped parking study. Existing bike ped planning process going on at the county level, as well as whatever monies are being spent now to study parking in the city of Sonoma, and that we shouldn't implement a new parking strategy without contemplating the climate benefits or costs of the new parking strategy. I'll just point out that the CARB's scoping study that came out last November highlights local actions for communities around the state and parking management, using parking as a tool to encourage, to reduce the amount of vehicle miles traveled is a highly recommended strategy by the Air Resources Board and all the modeling that's gone into meeting California's greenhouse gas goals. So that was a strong encouragement from our ad hoc. Specifically connecting the Sonoma City Trail to the plaza, improving the downtown bicycle parking, establishing a local walk campaign, and expanding bike and pedestrian infrastructure. Get to the actions. We recommend that the community development director meet with SCTA staff. My understanding is that's already going to be happening if it hasn't already, and come up to speed on all these other resources that are available to us at the county level. That there are also planning advisory committees, groups of planners from around the county that meet. So once a month, I believe those meetings happen roughly. Maybe even once every 2 months now. They may have reduced the frequency of those. And to just internal coordination with public works staff, with county staff, and the traffic safety committee was in our recommendations as well. So I'm encouraged to see a representative here tonight. And then to review the Traffic Safety Committee's recommendations, having, specifically, we were hoping the Traffic Safety Committee would consider any streets in the city of Sonoma that might benefit from the new law that allows us at the city level to reduce travel speeds. Historically, that's not been legal for cities to just arbitrarily reduce speeds, or not, I shouldn't say arbitrarily, but there was a more restrictive process in place that required a study and actual behavior. But now cities can make that reduction through policy, and so that struck me as something that shouldn't really happen here at this commission exclusively, but that it could happen more appropriately in front of the Traffic Safety Committee, because speed is considered one of the most important risks to traffic safety on our roads. So,
There's another component to the transportation that,
I'm getting to it.
okay.
Just a moment, let's let him finish, Alan,
There's
and
two
then
more,
your turn.
What I'll just jump ahead to Alan's because I know it's important to him and to all of us, frankly. Staff had identified originally a long-term potential for climate action for transportation in the February 2023 version of the Climate Action Plan, draft Climate Action Plan, specifically to establish a downtown shuttle. And we had some discussions here about that. I've had some private discussions with representatives of the Visitors Bureau, who has some great ideas about possible route, perhaps some feasibility of a kind of a tourism shuttle, electric bus-like, or initially maybe even a diesel bus, because those are more readily available and less costly, to just as an initial step to get the tourism community, the climate community talking together about whether there might be support for some kind of shuttle. The county, or up at the airport, SMART has just implemented a pilot program to move people from the train to the terminal. Something similar to that could be implemented here in Sonoma. We estimate that the first step would be for Alan and I as the ad hoc to begin meeting with these local business and other community leaders to explore the feasibility, route, and costs of launching a downtown shuttle, and we would do that between now and the end of the month of September, and that we would report back to you all here with our findings of that outreach work. And then the fourth item listed here as number 3 is to pursue grant opportunities to install EV charging infrastructure. And I actually have to defer to our sustainability coordinator, who has much more experience in this area than I, but we are keeping track of the EV recharging facilities in the city of Sonoma. Had a good conversation last week with the Public Works Director, who's a recent EV owner himself, and we are looking forward to improving the public's access to EV charging in the city of Sonoma, and so I feel confident that that's going to be in good hands here in the city. So those are the kinds of things we talked about. I'm still recommending a budget request of $30,000, even though we have no money. I'm still recommending our commission. We don't have to have money to make a recommendation, so we should certainly recommend it. The city council does have the authority to move money if they decide that climate action is important. So I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Let's see if there are other comments or questions from other commissioners. I suspect Alan, as the other member of the ad hoc, may want to chime in next.
I would like to talk about the other component of transportation. And there's a couple of things. One is that the automobile is an incredibly dangerous machine. And there are tens of thousands of people that are killed every year. And this is if the airlines had this kind of loss, the airlines wouldn't be flying. So one of the things that's interesting is that Europe has a rail system, and because of that rail system, their automobile death is 50% of what the United States is in a comparative analysis. And one of the opportunities that Sonoma has now is that SMART will be going over to Napa Valley and connect with, ultimately, with BART. And the opportunity for us to do a electric shuttle, whether it be a streetcar or an electric bus, to meet the SMART train at Shellville is something that we should be looking at. And it's also a solution for some of the parking issues around the square, where parking, lots of parking can be allocated around Shellville or Weinberg or one of those areas. So I think there's more innovative ways to look at this and to try to get out of the lodestone of cars.
Thank you, Alan. Other commissioner comments on the transportation?
Excuse me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I want to, and the cost to do a 6-mile streetcar is around $170,000, and it's typically around. It's an expensive situation, but the federal government has all kinds of programs to fund streetcars fully, even operational. So I think this is an avenue that needs to be examined. Thank you.
Thank you. Other commissioner comments, Philip?
Just a note, currently this year, California is receiving about $81 million in funding from the Department of Energy for EV charging stations. And if you look at the California Energy Commission's plan they submitted to the Department of Energy to get federal grants, they're concentrated along interstate corridors. So we have a little disadvantage at that. And so we're going to have to consider ways that we can get more active or risk having to argue we should have an interstate around us, which I don't want. So, but that's the way it's playing out.
Other comments? Commissioner comments? Seeing none, and my commissioner comments on this topic are as follows. I appreciated a lot of what I heard about this most important 65-70% of all the greenhouse gases are in this target area. There were a number of comments about parking. I think it's terribly important we get serious sooner rather than later about charging for parking in one way or another at the famous and historic plaza. We are sending a very poor climate message with free parking. And it's on the agenda from my point of view, front and center. We should also be aware of the Vietnam mile-traveled impact of city-sponsored events as much as we love city parties, farmers markets, races, all kinds of wonderful things on the plaza. They have tremendous transportation greenhouse gas impacts. As a climate commission, we are not able, I think, realistically to look the other way. We need to be tracking greenhouse gas impacts of those and thinking about ways on the margin over time to reduce those greenhouse gas impacts, and certainly before 2030 target. Finally, and in a similar vein of yes, we need to be thinking seriously as a climate commission about the impact on transportation of affordable housing, or the lack thereof, in the city of Sonoma, and the fact that without affordable housing, employees drive long distances to jobs locally, and that's increasing our VMT in ways that are not helpful to our climate 2030 net goals. So those are my commissioner comments. If that sparked anything else from my fellow commissioners, otherwise I think we're now ready to go to the public. with comments on the transportation recommendations going forward to staff? Matthew, you have people in the ether?
I have one hand raised on Zoom.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Is it on E? He's first. Oh, okay, sorry.
All right, Joel, you should be good to go after you unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you for bringing up the parking on the plaza, Chair Morrell. I didn't see that. It wasn't jumping out at me on the transportation plan, but I'm glad you mentioned that. I just want to remind everybody too that there was a automobile bicycle accident between this meeting and our last meeting, and there's a lawsuit associated with that accident, and I'm not sure if that's going to light a fire under the city council to take the bicycle and pedestrian safety more seriously. What I'm seeing here on the transportation is that the expanded bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure is called out as number 9 as low to medium, and I really feel like this is going to be like a digital thing. At some point in time, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, there's going to be a switch that will turn, that will make that will help people make the switch to biking and walking in the town. There's going to be a switch, and I'm not sure where that's going to be, but it's going to happen. And as far as the cost, I think it is important. The vice chair is maybe there's a way for us to talk about what the actual cost is. What the actual cost. I mean, and then let the city council know what it actually is going to cost, and then subtract out what the county's contribution to the city to that line item for the transportation, the biking transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe Hoyt. Much appreciated. Yes, sir. Other public comment on the transportation from the audience here?
Armando Zimmerman, West Main Street. I appreciated a lot of the comments that I heard today, especially single vehicle usage and that kind of thing. In the interest of disclosure, I termed out of the Traffic Safety Committee in January after, I believe, 7 years. And how that happened, I can't tell you because it's really a 2-year thing. But nonetheless, so I'm speaking just as a citizen of Sonoma at this point, and I should have made that more clear.
Perfectly acceptable as a citizen of Sonoma. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Speed limits. There's an article regarding the El Verano issue. The city's joining with the county and the state to begin a 4-year process to make that, from what I read, a safer place, new lighting going in and everything. But there's a recent article in the Index Tribune that talked about one of the considerations is increasing the speed limit on, quotes, Highway 12 at going through that area. And currently the speed limits are 30 and 35 all the way through until you get out to Agua Caliente. So to me, maybe that was a mistake by the reporter, but it's just absolutely bizarre. But it goes back to some years ago where I hate to say it, but a traffic engineer here in this city said to me personally, he said, if you continue to harp on 25 mile an hour, it's going to be raised instead of lowered. And so there's something that goes on. The car culture, the vehicle and whatever it lurks there, and because the city has said over and over again through 3 police chiefs, well, no, actually I haven't met the third one, but the previous 2, there's no money to enforce. So you can basically say you're going to do this, you're going to do that, but if you don't have some either physical barriers that change and driver habits and slow people down, if you were going to rely on enforcement, forget it so far. But I wish it wasn't that wasn't the case. A long time ago, there was a talk of a bypassing Sonoma in some way by signage, et cetera, that would route traffic to the west and down, maybe to Leveroni Road or whatever. It just really never went anywhere, and I don't know. I wasn't involved in that. But nonetheless, when you have commercial vehicles, and I mean true commercial vehicles, even tractor trailers, coming through town on Spain Street, where I live, so this is a personal, vendetta on my part, tour buses, large other vehicles, Amazon, this and that and the other and so forth. I mean, I they have to deliver. I understand, but we have signs that have been. There's one right on the plaza that says commercial vehicles prohibited. We have them up coming off of 12 on Spain Street. They're all over the place. They're out on 5th Street West. Okay, I'm going. Okay, we have. There is no enforcement of those signs. Those signs don't even tell people the definition of a commercial vehicle, much less is anyone going to pay attention to it anyway. So again, those are just, I'm just throwing these things out because from my anecdotal experience, a lot has happened. But anyway, okay, real quick. Anything that can slow traffic down and so forth, that doesn't involve traffic signals and whatever, and I'm going to harp again on traffic circles, anything that changes how drivers normally want to drive, those that would, abuse the traffic laws, et cetera, and the safety laws.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And the enforcement issue just makes me think about dogs in the plaza with the signs, but at least the horses are precluded, and I see very few horses on the plaza, so I guess that part of enforcement is working, but thank you. And a little levity at 7:4. Other comments on the transportation?
Well, I'll just say, since you mentioned the horses at the plaza, I miss the horses at the plaza. When I was a kid, people used to ride their horses to the plaza, and it wasn't a traffic problem at all.
And even the camel before she died. You remember the camel? Cassie.
Yeah, Cassie. That was much more recent than the...
Jennifer doesn't know about Cassie.
Anyway, I appreciate the comments from the public. Mr. Hoyt's comments about the recent tragedy on the road, and Mr. Zimmerman's comments about speed limits. I'll just point out that in the conversation, I don't believe I've talked about this at this commission yet. Susan Gordon convened I think she had 8 or 9 Caltrans engineers come to the El Verano school a month ago to talk about Highway 12 and specifically the Verano Avenue intersection, and the dangerous intersection that's there. It was quite impressive to see both the sheriff, I believe there was a representative of the police department, and all these Caltrans engineers there to solicit input from the public about that dangerous intersection and what we might do to fix it. Caltrans, you may have noticed already up there, has been fast tracking some improvements to that intersection, and they have plans to do a lot more up there. However, during that discussion, a representative of the sheriff's office essentially said something very similar to what Mr. Zimmerman had heard, and that is that prior to AB 43 passing this last year, there was a process in place where you could not change the speed limit without a study, and the study had to gauge how fast drivers are currently using the road, and you had to set it within a fraction. I think it was 80. You couldn't. Yeah. So that led to sometimes increases to the speed limit because people were traveling faster than the current speed limit. That has been repealed. That's no longer the law in the state of California. And it's taking a long time for planners and elected officials to really understand why the legislature made that change. So hopefully we'll be able to take advantage of that here in the Valley. I know they're starting to do so in Santa Rosa and some other places to implement new local authorities under AB 43. So that's what I can say to give us all some hope that we don't just have to be mowed down by all these vehicles. So I all done with my presentation, unless there's more questions.
No, I think we're ready to move on to government operations. Who will be doing the ad hoc presentation? Commissioner Ward, you're on. Go, Amber.
Alrighty. Not many changes from our presentation in April. We just sort of spiced it up a little bit on who we thought should take responsibility for certain items and made some adjustments to our initial moratorium on the city fleet plan after discussions with folks within the city government. So the main thing on that, since I think that's the main change that we had, is that instead of a moratorium, we are instead going to bringing forward a plan. I'm trying to find it in here because it's so much easier to have it to reference. Okay, is a plan to really take a look at the vehicles that we want to bring forward and replace and see, is there an EV model on the market that would provide the same needs that we currently have? For some, it might still be a no. For some, it could be, can we increase the service life of this vehicle until we see one on the horizon? And for some, maybe, yes, it does meet our needs, so let's move forward with buying electric instead. And we think that this just should be something that's we work with in conjunction with the Public Works Director and Sustainability Coordinator to really create this this plan, this matrix basically of how to move forward with an electrification plan for our city fleets. Other than that, everything is really pretty much the same as what we liked before. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. Other comments on the building, on the government operations side? Tom Collins.
Right, and just in the interest of not overburdening staff with too much, we wanted to be sure we focused on the near-term vehicle replacements. No need to do the vehicles that have just been purchased, but to be prepared for the ones that are likely to be requested of staff. If that could be at least done on a quick basis before our climate action plan is approved, that might be helpful for everybody. But if not, we'll deal with that. And I'll go ahead and defer. Go ahead.
Alan? Alan's in.
This recent heat wave we have had, going out there is like walking into an oven. And this is just the beginning. Little did I think, I don't think any of us thought, that when we got on this commission that we're going to be facing the beginning of an extinction event. It's just going to get hotter. And so we're going to have to do an adaptation, and this government operations are going to be key in that. So it's the kind of thing that I'm sorry to be a doomsday guy, but it's, we've got maybe 2 or 3 generations of life left on this planet if this heat continues to increase. And we're going to have to go live in caves. We're going to have to come up with some serious ways to protect ourselves both in and out of the air. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Alan? Other comments on government operations? Public comments at this point. Matthew, anybody out there?
I have one hand that just went up.
All right, there you go. Thank you.
All right, Joel, you should be good to go.
Okay, it would be good to know what sort of hurdles are in the way for city employees to conduct business using their bike, using it. I mean, the city is flat. I just don't understand what hurdles we need to get through to allow the city employee to use a bicycle for conducting their business.
Thank you, Joel. Public comments from the audience this evening on government operations. Here we go. Yes, please.
Hello, my name's Peter Gallagher, and I think that, obviously I don't want to speak up and tell you how to do your jobs, but I think that there was a comment earlier regarding water and or biochar and how different vendors are selected, and to make sure that the auditing or finance committee is appropriate. Please make sure stays true.
Point well made indeed with respect to the budget process and the acquisition. Yes, next comment, please.
Armando Zimmerman again. In reading the current I'm trying to find the chapter on it. The city, anyway, the city general plan. It seems to me to be the current plan is geared toward new things that are coming, and I think that what seems to be lost there is all the existing homes, some that are newer, some that are quite older. Depending on income levels, what can people do to, to modify their homes, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm concerned again. I mentioned earlier on connecting dots. The noise element I think, needs a lot of work. I mean, it's not just blowers, weed blowers, and everything else. A lot of it is from vehicles, and primarily from vehicles of different kinds and so forth. So, I would just like to see something more substantial about what people can do to make their homes quieter, safer, less apt to be polluted, especially on certain streets and where there's high volume of vehicle traffic and so forth. I would like the coming plan, the revision, to address some of the, some ways to mitigate what's already here, not just what we're going to do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a bit of a jump from government operations into buildings, but all the pieces, of course, in climate come together. My last thoughts on government operations is to remind my fellow commissioners that while government operations are important, they're a very small percentage of total greenhouse gas emissions, minuscule by respect to certainly transportation and a number of the others in the water and carbon area as well. So bear that in mind as we deal with government as if it's one of 6 areas, that it's a very small number on GHG. We're not going to be able to squeeze a whole lot out there.
Yeah, if I just, I neglected to mention that we did have a great meeting with city staff discussing all of this. That definitely came up. So it's a small piece of the puzzle, small piece of the pie, but also very, it's great to show leadership and to demonstrate that the city can do this, especially when many of these things can save the city money in the long run.
Absolutely, and each action by individuals and by government sends a signal that action is happening, that it's important, and it begins to build more action. So it's cumulative, to be sure. I believe now we can move on to building recommendations. Which commissioner is going to be doing the presentation on buildings?
I have a thought.
Alan, is that you?
The building world is, the architects, American Institute of Architects and green building efforts are very well advanced. I don't think that we can do any better or duplicate what the efforts that they've done. I think that if we just put all the building's recommendations and reference these different organizations that are very effective, I think that we would have done a good job.
And a presentation from the buildings team?
It's a perfect segue.
There you are.
To what I'm going to say.
You're segued in, sir.
That's beautiful. I'm going to jump to one part of the report, which was a slight variance with the draft of the plan that was originally proposed months ago, and that is we introduced the concept of commercial and residential energy benchmarking. And to give you a little background on that, in California, we have the Building Energy Benchmarking Program that's required for buildings over 50,000 square feet to report their energy use. To put that in context, the Veterans Memorial Hall is under 10,000, so it would have to be at least 5 times the size of Veterans Memorial Hall in order to be required to be reported. So I don't know that we have much other than water towers that are bigger than that. Mm-hmm. So the thought was to do what a number of municipalities are doing now, and that's impose requirements that businesses, and I would add commercial, residential establishments, use tools for calculating the energy use and making it public information. And a couple things about that. There is a benchmarking tool that EPA established that is real easy to use. You plug in the formulas of what your square footage is, the kinds of energy use you have, what your energy bills are, and it calculates a score, and it's a pretty well accepted score. I would like to see that imposed on not just commercial space, even under 50,000, but any commercial space. And I'd also like to see it implemented for residences that are being sold. And I'll tell you why that is. That's a little step more than what a lot of municipalities have done. It's very common in Europe, for example. It becomes a basis of the deal. Somebody knows going into buying a commercial building or a residential building, this is what your energy bills are going to be. This is why it's that way. And it provides an economic incentive for people to do things like solar, to do things like alternative energy proposals, because if it's available information and credible information, then it should be part of the business deal. It should be part of your decision whether you want to buy a house or buy a commercial building. So we put recommendations in to have this done, like the EPA, what they call the Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Energy Star, you're familiar with probably the markings on some of the things you can buy for your home. They also have overall building energy scores that can be calculated. So aside from that, much of what we have in our recommendations mirrors what was in the draft report, and maybe focuses a little bit more. And I really don't think I need to get into that because we've talked about it in the past.
Other comments from commissioners on the buildings? We're getting to the point I'm forgetting when we did public and when we didn't. We see if there's public comment, and then on the buildings, any public comment? Matthew, anything out there?
I have no one on Zoom.
I don't see anybody
Or
leaping
hand
up here. I would just note, Sustainability Coordinator Dr. Wagner and I have had some interesting corollary conversations about buildings and electricity use. The good news is we have Sonoma Clean Power available, and the Evergreen system is 100% renewable material. Even their baseline system is pretty darn clean. There is a significant chunk of the city that's still on the PG&E and the opt-out, and we could find and chase as a commission mechanisms of encouragement or otherwise to encourage people who are still on the PG&E system to move into the Sonoma Clean Power system, particularly at the Evergreen level, but even at the baseload level. And that might be mirrored on the cash for turf, previously lovingly called cash for grass. That could be something we could look at as a commission and eventually take up into the Climate Action Plan as ways to encourage everything from fiscal incentives, because it might cost a few nickels more, not clear. The PG&E rates aren't cheap. Or other ways, a lawn sign of congratulating them as being an Evergreen lover and so on. There are various ways to move forward, and it could be an important part of our move towards net zero. Any other comments on this one? Solid waste is next, one of our favorite topics. Travis, to be sure.
I'm just going to make a brief comment on buildings.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate
Please.
the work of the committee on on these recommendations and benchmarking. I'm not surprised that the commercial benchmarking is outside the scale of our city, but the recommendation to consider doing something at the time of sale or at the time of service change, which is when the new purchaser changes their account with the electric utility provider, could be considered in the city. And that's a very powerful time to reach out to new customers, new existing building owners that are now newly in those buildings, because they're about to go to Home Depot and buy a bunch of appliances to improve their house or whatever, and it's a great opportunity to get them to invest in making their home more greenhouse gas and energy efficient. So that I'm sure the city should be, well, already does recommend partnership with Bay Rent programs and the Sonoma Clean Power rebate programs, and we might want to just, in our outreach efforts, emphasize that a little bit more, our outreach and engagement efforts. So glad to see that in here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Going once, twice on this topic, I think it's now time, energy levels being what they are around the room, high though they may be, to move to solid waste. And the ad hoc on solid waste will be presented by...
I assume that's going to be me because
There you go.
nobody talks trash like me.
There you are. You should hear me on a bad day.
Oh boy. Not much new at all in what we've included. One of the problems that we're recommending reviewing is the plastics and single-use and styrofoam. The sense is that there's not a lot of policing, and that there may be some situations in which we need to do audits and see what the companies in the food service industry in Sonoma are doing. So that may be a little bit more pointed than it was earlier, but I think that's in some the best I can do. And anybody else want to talk dirty, go ahead. And
We're going to see, Matt, anybody on the line for solid waste for this evening?
There are currently no hands raised.
No
on Zoom.
hands raised. Anybody in public have the energy to comment on solid waste? Obviously, SB 1383 is dear to our hearts. It's made a big difference. There are new proposals afoot now for compost management within Sonoma County. We as a commission will want to look at that from a climate perspective. Proposals for up, I believe, near the Santa Rosa Airport are just going into RFP mode. So those of you interested in this field should kind of get current on what's happening there, selecting a firm to do some bids on the whole approach to compost management up in Sonoma County instead of shipping it out of county. Anything else talking trash of any
I'll just
kind?
add that
There we go.
I got a chance to go tour the Novato waste management compost facility and learned a lot more about compost. And I was kind of surprised to see that they don't actually pick through the compost once it gets dumped there. And this is roughly 85% of the compost from Sonoma County goes to Novato right now. Our compost, our organic matter from Sonoma does not. It goes out to Napa, American Canyon, as I understand it. But so a large fraction of the compost in the county does not stay in the county, and they touch it like 7 or 8 times. It goes from most places in the, like for the unincorporated county valley here. It goes to the transfer station, it gets compiled into a bigger truck, it gets dumped in the yard for active composting, but no one touches it. So if you've thrown a bag of garbage in there, it's going to get ground up by the grinding machine. And then later it will get filtered through an 1/8-inch screen, I believe it is. And all that plastic will end up being filtered out at that stage largely, which means that a large fraction of what we dump in the yard waste can is contaminated and ends up going to the landfill anyway and being used as active daily cover along with sewage sludge in the Novato landfill. So we can get a lot better in terms of our management of organics. I learned. So the other thing I did here is that yes, the city of Sonoma is a little idiosyncratic in its solid in our single use plastics, in that the facility in Napa claims to be able to recycle compostable cups and whatnot, and most of the rest of the county and other facilities do not allow that. And the way it actually plays out in Napa is that only a very specific fraction of those cups do actually get composted. So it's a little bit of a shell game, is probably a summarized version of it. So we look forward to that getting continued attention and review over the next couple of years.
Thank you, Tom. I think at this point we're ready to move to 3.2 unless there are other commissioner comments or excited public people. Jennifer's got a red light on her.
I have a red light.
There you go. So if I'm right, we're going to 3.2, or you have some more comments on 3.1 before we
We're still
move
on
on.
3.1.
Right.
So you guys wanted to talk about community engagement, and I need to talk about next steps, and then
Yes,
we'll
of
move
course.
to 3.2.
We want to talk about moving the plan forward. I thought that came later, but I'm happy to do it now. On the community engagement side, we have put forth from the community engagement ad hoc a specific written plan for engagement. It's designed to be engagement, not outreach. It's engagement's a two-way street. The goal is true involvement by city members. What we're doing is trying to get community involvement on the climate action plan as it evolves forward from this meeting this evening moving forward, so that we have an ability to move that plan forward to the city council for council approval, which then leads us to the ability to begin to take climate actions as enumerated in the climate action plan. The hope is to have a late September, potentially sliding to very early October, public meeting, noticed and so on, with presentations, with an executive summary of the evolving 80-page draft plan that's been written well and is being revised and improved with the kinds of materials that have been presented this evening. So staff, sustainability coordinator and team are going to be working on that. And the public engagement plan includes a series of over 20 local partners who we would reach out to with the executive summary and an encouragement of each of these groups, from churches to environmental groups to economic groups and the business community, to be involved in reaching out to their own members with this information so that we can get a broad range of inputs on the climate action plan as we move it forward. And then we will be looking at various kinds of tabling actions, potentially with the youth commissioner in the lead, some high school actions once school begins again, now that the vast fun of summer is coming rapidly to a close. And Kendall has just returned from Europe, which we're very excited about. And KSVY and other announcements on the local newspaper. So those are kind of a summary of the public engagement process as it's currently envisioned.
All right, so with that, what's going to happen after this meeting tonight is we're going to take all of the comments that have been provided throughout the number of meetings that you guys have already happened, and I'm going to work with Travis, and we're going to look at the document and see how we can take pieces and make it a little bit more specific to answering the questions of who, what, when, where, and how much. So making sure that we really call that out in a simple way. And we have a lot of the actual science and other background, but we want to basically pull out these recommendations and really pull them forward. And then what we'll do with that document is release it probably in mid-September and start that comment where we're asking for the community to participate and have that meeting halfway through. We would have the public comment meeting and let people come talk. It wouldn't be a Climate Action Commission meeting. It would just be a public meeting. We could have up to 2 of the commissioners participate at that meeting, but staff would be leading it with those commissioners to talk about what that is, what this climate action plan's ideas are, and then taking public comments. Staff will then take those comments, maybe adjust the actual plan that we're going to present to you, maybe not, but present all the comments as well as our draft to you at your November meeting is the plan right now. So at the November meeting, you will have had chance to review the draft and you'll be able to provide any comments. And we would ask you at that time, hopefully, after listening to the public comment, additional public comments that will be at that meeting, having your discussion to recommend either approval or approval with your modifications, to then take that document to City Council. And then at City Council, we're looking at probably going in January as that meeting and asking for their approval. So with an approval of a climate action plan, that's not necessarily a budget approval or anything like that. We would have to take a separate budget action. There may not be funds available at the get-go. It may be that they adopted the plan and say, yeah, this is a great idea, let's start moving forward. Because part of what these specific items that you've identified require us to do more work, right, to actually get them through. So that would be part of our next steps, is working with you all at your next meeting, which would probably be around February, and have you guys create a work plan. And with that work plan, we'd identify what those priority items are that are in this plan, hopefully by timeline, and then take those items, see what we can do with staff as is, and then see what items we would actually be requesting budget allocations for. So that's kind of how we're looking at it in the next steps. We are, we could present, have, one or two of you come and present to pros. It would be basically kind of an info session to them. They can add their recommendation of support, but they don't actually have a recommendation role, and neither does Planning Commission. But it would be more of an informational, and they could support moving forward or have further suggestions if that's something of interest. We could do that. So I would open that to you guys for discussion right this second, because we would need to schedule those sooner than later. Being September, being the meeting of pros is happening is September. It would be presenting ideas. We wouldn't have the draft probably for pros, and then we would present to Planning Commission potentially at that end of September, that second September meeting as well, or the October. Let's see, what else did I want to say? So that's mostly about next steps. What you have provided to us are what we're going to look at as suggestions as far as the funding and the WHO. We may have further suggestions. So even if the WHO is a specific nonprofit, it may be that there's other nonprofits out there, and we may add to that list of nonprofits that do this kind of work, or if the lead is actually still the city, and that we would be putting out kind of an RFP for looking at moving forward. A key component of this is also going to be funding, so we may be reaching out to you guys for more information on as a group basis. It'll be a blind copy kind of thing, and just asking if there was certain funding that you knew about that wasn't in here. So it's not a discussion, it's just more of, I just need more information. And that includes the public too. If you have any if you have any funding opportunities or things like that, just please send them our way so that we are aware of everything. The couple of other items that came up were the Sonoma County Active Transportation Plan. I did have a meeting with them last week. So as part of what we'll continue to work on this document is we're going to supplement this document with what's actually happening right now. So that includes the ATP plan, but it also includes our parking management plan that's moving forward and the components that will be in that. The parking management plan is tentatively scheduled to go in September to City Council, for those that were interested. And then, as I stated earlier, the general plan is connected to this, and this will be connected to the general plan. So there's already items within our current general plan that have some policy recommendations, and these, for those that haven't looked at the climate action plan for the county, that it actually calls them out for the city specifically, what is in our general plan right now that they were pulling out and referencing within our city for their cap, for the county cap. So the general plan is connected, really in the transportation aspect with circulation and SB 743, which is associated with vehicle miles traveled. So, and then greenhouse gas as well. So all of that will also be part of our environmental review. We'll be doing a comprehensive environmental impact report for the general plan update. So once that's complete, there may be mitigation measures that are identified that then say we need to update your climate action plan associated with that, which will probably occur. So that is concluding my statements. I think we've covered everything. So my question was, do you want to potentially go to pros and planning commission? Are there other regional agencies that maybe we want to share this information with, and is that on making sure that that's on the list for the community engagement ideas?
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer, for a terrific summary of not only where we are, but where we're headed in the next few months of real action moving forward to move this whole process forward. Commissioners, before I jump in, your thoughts on meeting with the Pros Commission, the Planning Commission, or other groups that we should potentially meet with? Alan?
What's that?
Is your hand up? Right? No. Okay. Just scratching. Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm asking if any of the commissioners, including Alan, have any of these other commissions that you would like to have us meet with, including the Pros Commission, which is Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. That's what it stands for.
So I'm enthused to have Jennifer on board and finally a sense of leadership and guidance here. I know Travis is doing his best, but hasn't had the authority to do that. So I'm really excited to see this moving forward. And the schedule makes sense to me. The idea of being in front of Pros and Planning Commission, an opportunity to present what we're doing to them, I think makes a lot of sense, and kind of surprised we didn't think about ourselves. So thank you for that.
Well, I just like to say that I think that the work that's been done here has been very good. But it's baby steps, and we need some big steps right now because we're facing an emergency. That's my feeling.
Yeah, and that I think we as a commission kind of represent those voices in the city that feel that urgency. So that we do need to deliver that message. I think Alan's right in that. And you know, the risk is that we don't do enough quickly enough, and we end up having consequences we really aren't prepared for, don't want to have to suffer through. So I know that there's sympathy for that perspective on the council itself, and so I think they'll be happy to hear that this plan is coming together and that we're moving toward engagement implementation. A couple of questions popped up while Jennifer was going over all of the details of our next steps. I think we have to decide who is going to represent the commission on these committees' presentations if we decide to do that. I think we should also wonder if the Traffic Safety Committee should be involved in or hear our recommendations, or if they can be independently involved in the design of how they will be utilized in the active transportation plan, planning, etc. I was also curious about the phasing of the general plan, what you have in mind for when all of those activities will likely be happening. Is it going to take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever? I don't have any idea about that right now. And then perhaps most germane to my thinking on the transportation ad hoc is how the parking management plan, which sounds like it's ready to go to council in next month, whether the issues we raised in our report might be reflected. I frankly have not been following that as closely as I probably should have, and would it make any sense for that issue to come before us, or for us to engage in that process a little bit more than we have to date as a commission?
Ready?
Okay. Yes, please.
All right. I agree. You guys need to identify the who. So I will say you do need to do that, but I'll answer the rest of the questions, and then if there's any more questions, and then we can start talking about the who, and you guys can discuss that part. Let's see. Traffic Safety Commission, I'll have to see what their schedule is and, what's that plan, and what their directive that they've been provided, as a commission as to the applicability. So whether they go the active transportation plan, yes. they need to be involved in that. And so there's a couple of different things. The climate action plan, there may be, I'll look closer, there may be some relevance, but at the same time, you know, I would say pros is more and planning commission is more affected by the climate action plan, as we've discussed today, and my history with climate action plans. As far as the parking management plan, probably will go ahead and release that in a couple of weeks. I have one more review to do. And the things that you have discussed are all in there. So you should be very happy. Now, I will say, again, it's a parking management plan. So the focus is about parking. And then it's looking at the future in the sense of these are the other things that we should be looking at. So we're phasing it. So you can look at what's in the phasing and provide comments. We are not going to have another meeting before that meeting is. You can come as an individual to the city council meeting for yourself, not representing the Climate Action Commission, because it is not an item before you for discussion. When in the future, if there are things coming up, such as what you were talking about, if the commission wants to provide comments on something that's going on that affects what's going on in our region, then that's an item that needs to be agendized and discussed to have you guys tell us what you want us to share with that in group or on that specific project or an environmental review. That has to be agendized for your guys' discussion for us to be able to comment as a commission. Okay? So I just want to make sure that we all understood that part. So the parking management plan, it's not going to come to you. It's going to go, but it does have certain things that you guys have discussed you will have in your climate action plan. Let's see. That just means it's consistent. So, let's see. ATP and the general plan. So the ATP, I'm not sure what the schedule is for that. We are still in the discussion of what that sidewalk gap analysis, and I'm trying to get that price down by like half. So I'm still working on that part. There's a lot of data that they've requested, and so I'm trying to get that done. General plan. So with the general plan, we are going to go to City Council in September with the community engagement plan for that, as well as a recommendation for the ad hoc committee that will be formed for the general plan, which was part of the request by City Council when they approved the contract. And so we are going to move that at the meeting, the second meeting of City Council in September. I want to say it's around the 20th, I want to say, 20th. So I did want to state that that is the case. It is a 2-year process because it is a full environmental review document, and those take months. So we're looking at a number of engagement opportunities that will happen with the community. We are looking at touching all elements of the general plan, not the housing element probably, because we just finished that one. But we need to do the rest of the elements, and in the sense of look at them, make sure they're consistent with current state law, and then look at our community and see what their input is if there are certain things that we need to address or update policies around. I'm not sure, I haven't looked closely, but I've looked at other general plans, and sometimes they talk about items that don't exist today or problems that aren't current. So I just wanted to put that out there. So
I got a quick comment.
Okay.
As you get through the drafting of your plan, there may be things that pop up that you want to consider having a joint meeting on, and you should, for example, if we're going to tell the parks, the pros people that they've got to put Miyake Forest and biochar, we better talk to them about it. So please use your discretion too as what we might be able to help with.
Okay.
I would certainly recommend a sooner rather than later meeting with the Pros Commission. Their chair is out of town for the summer. He's leaving in 2 weeks, coming back, so summer's coming to an end. Since I know him personally, that's why I know that. John will be back in early September and ready to go with a pros commission joint effort of some kind. There's a great deal of interest on with respect to trees. A lot of the water ad hoc recommendations have resonated with a number of the folks on the pros commission, as well as even the Olson public meeting tonight that conflicted time-wise with this, but I know they're interested in a Milwaukee Forest potential green pocket forest at Olson Park, having picked up on what some of our earlier discussions of this ad hoc were. So yes, definitely earlier rather than later joint effort of some kind with pros, at least with a couple of us. I would certainly volunteer for that.
I'll just say it's so refreshing to have city leadership again. Nothing like having a real city manager and real community development director. It's like we've been functioning without these leaders for a couple of years now, it seems, and so it's really refreshing to not feel like we're adrift. So thank you for that.
So I would make a recommendation that when you go to pros, that a representative, at least one representative from the carbon sequestration, thank you, I can speak, would, I missed a syllable there, would be part of who would go. So whether it's just that individual or two. And then for planning, I would recommend that building would go for that conversation with potentially one so definitely building, but maybe even transportation, because a lot of what we're talking about now with parking management is adding bicycle parking regulations and things like that, and that was just adopted by City Council as well.
I would certainly be happy to try to fit in the pros commission conversation as a member of this commission and as a part of that ad hoc on water and carbon, which gets us into trees and other such things.
I'd be happy to join if there's no one else that would want to go.
The question is about the pros commission?
Yes.
I think you guys both have heard now 2 nights feelings about biochar. So I think you'll go to the pros commission with taking that into account. I trust you will. So I don't feel the need to go to the pros commission to discuss those items. I am interested in going to the planning commission with Philip, I think, as indicated.
That sounds like a good representation in both directions.
And staff will be with you, so. All right, so those will be those 2. And then as far as community engagement, you know, we can do it based on availability. So once we figure out when certain, like maybe a farmer's market or other types of things are available, we can send it out and see who responds. And we'll limit it to 2. So we'll just plan it that way. Okay? All right, I think that concludes this part, and then we can move on.
I think that's correct. We do have 3.2, which has to do with the ad hoc committee status, as I've read it and understood it. Ad hocs have a particular purpose and a particular time frame. As chair, it's my understanding that 4 of the ad hocs have reached their appropriate goals and their presentations and their time frame and are open to be disbanded. I assume that requires comments from the public and then a vote, a motion and a vote to make that happen, as in consideration of, as it's phrased. Does that sound about right? So that should that would be the next item then, to have a motion to disband one or more of the 4 ad hocs: water, transportation, buildings, government ops. Travis, am I ahead of the curve? Public comment on this before the motion. That's correct.
And there are currently no hands raised on
No
Zoom.
hands? Anyone in the massive audience that would like to address this item? Seeing, yes, come on forward. Yes, of course.
I just have a question because I'm trying to figure out if
if I'm out of line again, which is not unusual.
Introduce yourself for the record,
Armando
please.
Zimmerman, yeah.
Thank you, of
Okay,
course.
so the parking plan that is being mentioned, it's moving toward, I guess, being sent to the city council. I'm just wondering if that parking plan includes commercial tourist, the commercial tourist trade, big buses, from the Mission Inn, large vans, not just buses, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because I sometimes have gone out in front of my house, and there's a large vehicle there idling during this heat season, obviously. No one in it except maybe the driver. And I knocked on the window and I said, if you're not picking, I try to do it in a non-confrontational way. If you're not letting passengers off or picking them up, there's a time limit. I think it's like 5 minutes or something like that, for you to sit and idle and whatever. And I get this look of, surprise. Basically, they probably want to say other things to me, but nonetheless. So I say, you might look down. I don't know. I see buses in the horseshoe in front of the city hall. I don't know if that's a place that's. I may just be out of line saying that I know. I don't know. I don't know if the state parking lot behind the barracks, which is controversial right now in terms of what the state wants to do with that as far as parking, and then further back behind the vets building. So even for me, I would, not that it's my job to tell people where they can park or can't park. I'm just citing. I want to be accurate. So that part, I'm just wondering if that will be looked at or not, or maybe it's already in the works. The other comment I want to make is traffic safety is not. It's not a commission. It's a lower level. It's a committee, right? And so consequently, the Public Works Director and his staff and the police chief, and I don't know what other people are involved when complaints come in from the public. The volunteers, the public component of the 5 committee members, come in later. They don't come in at the beginning. And also, it's been my experience that the city has, through Public Works, has contracted with at least 2 companies, W-Trans and GHD or whatever. Okay, I just want to say. And they get a look at a lot of stuff, and sometimes what came to us as the public members was already in a lot of legalese and just esoteric language. And so I have stacks of things that were handed to us over the years called they were called toolkits. We never trained on what those toolkits were. And so it was what you could glean at, individually, and then walk in kind of cold to a lot of the meetings. So anyway, that's just public feedback.
Thank you for the feedback. Excellent. Seeing no other public comment, I would urge a motion for the disbandment of the 4 ad hoc committees.
I move to disband the ad hoc committees with the exception of the Community Engagement Committee.
There's a motion. Do I hear a commissioner second to said motion?
I second.
Amber has seconded. Now, do we need public comment again on this? No, now we have the motion. Commissioner, discussion of the motion is next. A lot of energy for discussion of this motion. Hearing none, I'm happy to call a vote. Matthew, I think you'll call the roll.
Yep.
Please, sir.
Commissioner Heinerman,
Aye.
Commissioner Nickel,
Aye.
Commissioner Ward,
Aye.
Vice Chair Conlon,
Yes.
and Chair Morrell.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, team. So now we're on item 4, which has to do with commission members' reports and comments. Any commissioners have any particular items to bring to the public's attention and to the attention of other commissioners with whom you can't speak during the normal periods because we're now agendized? Seeing any? I have one, but I would go last. Tom?
Yeah, I'll throw something out there.
Yes, sir.
I don't think this group only meets once every 3 months or so, so I do so much in 3 months that it's hard to summarize. But
Yeah,
I was able to go to a Highway 37 policy planning committee meeting, which is the 4 county transportation agencies are working on how to deal with sea level rise and the traffic congestion problems in Highway State Route 37. And so the total project to build a causeway to replace the roadway, which will become inundated fairly soon. It's already underwater, has been underwater in past years through Marin County. Price tag for that's about $8 to $9 billion, which there's no money. We can't find that much money in the couch cushions. So we are looking to. The plan is to phase the project, and it looks like there is substantial agreement to focus on a widening of the segment between Sears Point and Mare Island, but they're going to start with an extended bridge right at Toll Lake Creek, which is close to the Sears Point Raceway. The idea that there would be an extra lane right there that will allow those of us coming to Sonoma to not sit in traffic waiting for Vallejo. That would be a good impact. The problem that some of us have been noticing is that even if they build this, add 2 lanes in both directions, it's going to move the bottleneck that we currently have in the Vallejo East Bay area now. It's going to move that bottleneck to Highway 101 in Novato. And that's been downplayed, I think, in some of the analysis to date, and it's one thing that we're hoping that people will be paying a little more attention to, that is an anticipated outcome of the new project. They'll also be doing some tolling of that segment, and tolling is the only thing that's going to reduce the vehicle miles traveled. If you simply build a wider roadway, many more people will end up sitting in traffic longer. But if you toll, then people will find another way around. And that's actually got a secondary impact on us in Sonoma Valley, because people will maybe start, for example, Sonoma Valley people, to avoid the bottleneck, might start driving over Lakeville, which is itself not ready for that traffic. It's already a fairly dangerous road in the county. So these are some things we should be paying attention to as Valley residents and folks concerned about climate, because of the greenhouse gas implications of all of this work. So that was something I wanted to just report out on. That's enough for me tonight, my goodness.
Thank you. I had one item to report on. I learned recently, many of us have been aware of something called the Catalyst Fund, a local, very important fund supporting community action, particularly of COVID, post-COVID, as it links to underserved communities and links to health-related actions and so on. I've learned recently that there's a new Catalyst Reimagine grant available These are accepted up to $100,000. They are not projects, but they're looking for something that brings together various elements of the community in some unique and critical ways. Reimagine Grants is the name. They include all phases of innovation, research, experimentation, pilots, and partnership development with a focus on 4 bullets. I read the bullets, but where I'm going with this is the potential for a very interesting project on climate-smart tourism in Sonoma over a number of years, thought through seriously. Efforts that involve critical cooperation and collaboration among key actors who must work together for a solution. That certainly sounds like what we're talking about. Efforts that involve leveraging government resources or utilizing them better in public-private partnerships. Bingo. Ideas for new solutions that need to be tested, piloted, and designed further, including building an organization's capabilities to execute the new solution, who would do what and what needs to be thought through and proposed for implementation. And 4, research and convenings to define an emerging or chronic problem and seek solutions that no single organization could address alone. This is potentially an opportunity for the environmental community and the business community to collaborate on a critical issue, put together a dynamite proposal, and make a difference in terms of thinking this through over potentially something like 3 years. So I wanted my fellow commissioners, when I'm allowed under the Brown Act to do so, to know that this exists, and maybe one of you might want to join me in pursuing this further, should that strike your fancy. Thank you. Are there any other? I've got to find my agenda now. I think we're just about ready. Staff comments would be next. Travis, hang in there. We're almost done.
I just have a brief one. So SB 1383, which is the state law that mandates the organics removal from trash and hopefully being composted. We received a grant last spring, a significant grant. A portion of that was used by our Joint Powers Authority to subsidize the purchase of compost for use in agriculture open space land. The remainder, we pooled it all together to buy those kitchen pails, food scrap kitchen pails. I was just at the farmer's market about 3 weeks ago giving them away, and I saw Amber there. And I'm proud to say we purchased 2,700, and I gave away the 2,500th at the farmer's market. So we have 200 left, so get yours while they're still hot. We have just been informed that at a minimum, sometime next spring, we're going to get $75,000 grant from Cal Recycle to use for SB 1383 support. So this is something all the jurisdictions are getting together to talk about. What's the best way to do that? Can we pool? If we're going to purchase something, can we pool it together? But it's good that we're getting this money. And all I know is it's a minimum of $75,000 is all that Cal Recycle has said. So that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. I believe we're there. Unless I'm hearing anything else going on, it's time for an adjournment. The commission meeting has ended. Thank you all for a very useful meeting.